can't represent you anymore. I said, why? Well, because you're conservative and you're a Christian and I was like, what?
It was about faith in God.
My beliefs and my faith.
And that's our relationship with God.
They said you have to do it or we're going to fire you. That's not a line from a movie. That's a real conversation, on a real set, between a real actor and real Hollywood executives. And his answer? I'm not going to do it. So they fired him.
You know, for me, an actor, to see something like that, you know, it really, once the lead guy is really tackling something hard and really jumping into it himself.
3 days into production, cost him $1 million, blacklisted him for 2 years. And you know what he lost it over? Not politics, not a scandal. He refused to kiss a woman who wasn't his wife.
You know, I won't do kissing scenes. I've never wanted to do it. And, you know, I got crucified about 10 years ago where, you know, they thought I was this religious zealot that I wouldn't do sex scenes. And it was really because I love my wife more than I love my craft.
That's not the only story.
And just you saying, just that you stick to your convictions and you don't kiss anyone outside of your wife.
Today I'm bringing you 6 actors who were told, directly, to their faces, that their faith in God was the problem.
And now all that stuff is completely a one-way street. It's like you say what we say, or you're out. You're out of the club.
Some lost their agents, some lost their homes. One was warned he'd never work again before he even took the role. And the one I just showed you, his redemption story will leave you speechless. This is the scripture. So here's the thing about Hollywood. It's an industry that puts tolerance and inclusion on every award show banner. It celebrates every identity, every lifestyle, every belief system, except one. These aren't stories about actors who casually mentioned God in an interview and got some Twitter backlash. These are actors who lost jobs, lost agents, lost millions of dollars. Some of them lost entire careers they'd spent decades building. And they all have one thing in common. They were told, explicitly, directly, to their faces, that their Christian faith was the problem. Now look, I'm not here to rage about Hollywood. That's not what this channel does. But I am here to show you something real. Because when an industry that constantly preaches tolerance and inclusion turns around and fires someone for refusing to violate their conscience, that's worth examining. So here's what's coming. 6 actors, 6 different stories, escalating in intensity. Some of them you know, some of them will surprise you, and by the end, you're going to see a pattern that's impossible to ignore. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, stories about people who chose conviction over comfort, stand with us. Like the video, subscribe if you haven't, and share this with one person who needs to see that faith still costs something. Moment number 1. Kirk Cameron. Let's start with a name everyone knows. Kirk Cameron, Mike Seaver from Growing Pains, teen heartthrob of the 80s, posters on bedroom walls across America. What most people don't know is that Kirk became a born-again Christian at 17, right in the middle of the show's peak popularity. And almost immediately, he started making decisions that Hollywood couldn't understand. He refused to do scenes with coarse language. He pushed back on storylines that implied premarital sex for his character. He wasn't trying to be difficult, he was trying to be faithful. And then came the Piers Morgan interview in 2012. Piers asked Kirk about gay marriage. Kirk gave an honest answer rooted in his Christian convictions. And the backlash? His own former co-stars publicly condemned him. The industry that made him famous treated him like a pariah. Here's what Kirk said later. You really need to decide, if you're an actor in Hollywood, whether you want to be faithful to the Lord or you want to be popular, because chances are you're not going to be both. That's not bitterness, that's clarity. Kirk saw the fork in the road early, and he made his choice. He's been making faith-based films ever since. Smaller budgets, smaller audiences, but zero compromise. Moment number 2. Dean Cain. And then there's Dean Cain. You know him as Superman from Lois and Clark, the guy who literally played the most iconic symbol of truth and justice in American pop culture. Dean's been openly Christian and conservative in Hollywood for years, and recently he exposed something that most people suspected but couldn't prove. An email leaked from GalaxyCon, one of the biggest fan conventions in the country, explaining why they wouldn't book him. The exact words? GalaxyCon's values don't align with Dean. Let that sit for a second. Superman, banned from a fan convention, because of his values. But here's the part that really got me. Dean said in an interview that casting directors have told him directly, not behind his back, to his face, that they won't consider him for roles because he talks about being a Christian. Their logic? I can't have him on set because he'll cause trouble. Cause trouble. By being a Christian. Superman can fight aliens, stop bullets, and save the planet. But a man of faith? That's where Hollywood draws the line. Moment number 3. Kevin Sorbo. Now here's where the pattern gets undeniable. Kevin Sorbo. You know him as Hercules. One of the most watched TV shows in the world in the 1990s. Kevin didn't get slowly phased out. He didn't get the subtle Hollywood cold shoulder. His agent and his manager, the people whose literal job is to represent him, sat him down and said it straight to his face. "We can't work with you anymore." Kevin asked why. Their answer? Because you're a conservative, and you're a Christian.
And I got to a point with my agent, who was a big-time agent, I was with a long time, and my manager just said, "We can't represent you anymore." I said, "Why?" "Well, because you're conservative, and you're a Christian, and I was like, "What?"
That's not a rumor. That's not speculation. That's a man quoting his own representatives. The people he paid to fight for him told him his faith was the reason they were walking away. Kevin calls himself the original cancel culture victim. He said, "It's an industry that screams for tolerance, and yet it's a one-way street." But here's what Kevin did. He didn't disappear. He built his own studio, Sorbo Studios. He's made over 60 films since Hollywood showed him the door. He didn't beg for the industry's approval. He built something new. I want to pause here. We're only 3 stories in, and the pattern is already impossible to miss. An agent dropping a client for being Christian. Superman banned from a fan convention. A teen icon blacklisted by his own co-stars. If this is resonating with you, drop a comment. Type "still standing" in the comments if you think these stories need to be heard. Your engagement helps this video reach more people. Alright, back in. Because the next 3 are where this video goes from frustrating to absolutely powerful. Moment number 4. Antonio Sabato Jr. Antonio Sabato Jr. This one is different, because Antonio didn't just lose roles. He lost everything. Antonio was a soap opera star, a Hollywood leading man, the kind of guy who never had trouble getting work. And then in 2016, he spoke at the Republican National Convention. He talked about his faith, his patriotism, and his love for this country. And that was it. He was done. In an interview with Variety, Antonio was brutally honest about what happened next. He had to sell his house, move his family to Florida. He took construction jobs, actual physical labor, to feed his kids. This is a man who was on magazine covers, and he's pouring concrete because Hollywood decided his faith and his convictions made him unemployable. And here's what makes Antonio's story different from a lot of cancel culture complaints. He's not just saying it was hard. He documented it. He named it. He told NBC News exactly what happened. There's no ambiguity here. When asked if he'd do it again, knowing the cost, his answer was immediate. Yes, every time. Because some things are more important than a career. That's not stubbornness, that's conviction. Moment number 5. Jim Caviezel. And then there's Jim Caviezel. And this one hits different because Jim was warned before he even took the role that changed everything. It's 2002. Mel Gibson calls Caviezel and offers him the role of Jesus Christ in The Passion of the Christ. But before Caviezel says yes, Gibson tells him something chilling. "You'll never work in this town again." Gibson wasn't being dramatic. He was being honest. He knew what playing Jesus would cost in an industry that celebrates everything except sincere Christian faith. And he told Caviezel to count the cost before he committed. Caviezel said yes anyway. The Passion of the Christ went on to become one of the highest-grossing R-rated films in history, over $600 million worldwide. And Jim Caviezel, the man who carried that film on his back, he described what happened next in a Polish interview. "All of a sudden, I stopped being one of 5 most popular actors in the studio, and I hadn't done anything wrong. I just played Jesus. I just played Jesus." 5 words. And they tell you everything about how Hollywood operates. You can play a serial killer, you can play a drug lord, you can play the devil himself, but play Jesus with sincerity, and you're done. And here's what makes Caviezel remarkable. He's been asked multiple times if he regrets it. Every single time, his answer is the same. He'd do it again, in a heartbeat. Because, as he puts it, the rejection of Hollywood is nothing compared to the acceptance of Christ. That's not a man who lost. That's a man who chose the right battle. Moment number 6. Neil McDonough. And that brings us back to where we started. Neil McDonough. And I saved this for last because this is the one that wrecked me. Neil is a working actor. You've seen him in Band of Brothers, Minority Report, Captain America, Justified, Yellowstone. The man works constantly, but there was a season where he almost lost everything, and it started with a line he drew before he ever set foot on a certain set. Neil is a devout Catholic, goes to church daily, married to his wife Ruve since 2003, 5 kids, and when they got married, he made a decision. He would never do a love scene with another woman. He would never kiss another actress on screen. Those lips, he said, are meant for one woman. That was the line. So in 2010, he gets cast in ABC's Scoundrels alongside Virginia Madsen. 3 days into filming, the producers tell him he has to do an intimate scene. Neil says no. Their response? Do it or you're fired. His response? I'm not going to do it. So they fired him. 3 days in. He lost $1 million. And then the calls stopped coming. Here's Neil describing what happened next.
There was 2 years of me not getting a job and losing my big house in Hancock Park and cars and everything and begging from this. And, I was never a guy who would ask to borrow money from anyone. I'd rather just figure it out myself. So I lost basically everything.
You heard that. I remember falling to my knees and saying, God, why have you forgotten about me? That's real. That's not a soundbite for a faith channel. That's a man in the wilderness, wondering if obedience was worth it. And here's the redemption part, the part that makes this story different from just another Hollywood is bad rant. Graham Yost, the creator of Justified, called Neil, offered him a role. What was supposed to be 2 episodes turned into 13. Neil says his career has been phenomenal ever since. But here's what stayed with me. Even after everything, the firing, the blacklist, the financial devastation, the years of doubt, Neil doesn't sound bitter. In that same interview, he said, God has given me so much. We all experience challenges in our lives. If you have faith, you can get through anything. That's not theory. That's a man who lived through the fire and came out praising the one who walked him through it.